Hi, welcome to Evidence for Faith. I am back with you on this whole lesson we're doing on this Goliath fellow, the story of Goliath, and what evidence there has been with Goliath. We've already seen a number of things. For instance, he was a Philistine. He was from Gath. He was a champion. We saw his name. We've seen pieces of his armor. And talking about that, with that discovery that we mentioned in the last lesson that was found in 1962, well, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about some of the weapons that Goliath used. Now, in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 4 through 7, God tells us about some of the weaponry that Goliath had. And part of this is actually one of the pieces we're going to talk about. We have it like right here on the wall, a replica copy of it, and it's a spearhead. I'm not going to get too much ahead of it because we want you to listen to this lesson. This is so cool. You're really going to enjoy this. So let's dive in. A sixth point I want to make about this is Goliath is carrying weapons when he goes to his battle with David. It's mentioned in 1 Samuel 17 that he's carrying a javelin, he's carrying a spear, and later in verse 51 he's carrying a sword. That's the sword with which David's going to decapitate him later on. But the weapons that you find at that site where this farmer's plow hit the ground there and was pulling these things out, the weapons that we read there were also found. Many weapons were found there. We read of his great size. We already mentioned Goliath's great size, but this javelin slung between his shoulders, the shaft of his spear, it reads, was like a weaver's beam. That's pretty good size. His spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron. Now, some artifacts that were found at this site were huge spearheads. Huge, much larger than normal. Look at the spearhead on this Roman spear that we see here. This spearhead's not very big. We're talking about some massive spearheads here. Matter of fact, if you take a look, we have an image of it there, but I want to show you because we got a replica of one of them that you see there in the museum. And these spearheads, like this one here on the wall, this spearhead is way larger than any conventional weapon of that time period would have been for a common man to use. It's gigantic. It mentions that there were 4 large ones found at that site in this archaeological paper. It reads, and I'll quote, "All 4 are identical in shape, though they differ in size. The shortest was 33 centimeters long, including the tang, and weighs about 0.35 kilograms. The longest is 66 centimeters long and weighs over 2 kilograms. Now, the longest, weighing over 2 kilograms, that's slightly over 4.5 pounds. And we have an actual replica, I'll pull it off the wall here. We have an actual replica of this that from that dig that they found at Kfar Monash. And this thing is huge. And it's a spear. You can even see on the edges, there's dents and stuff in this, though this is not the original. We have the photograph of the original there, but you can see there's dents and carvings and stuff in here that have been made because it was in use. It wasn't some decoration. This thing was used, and it's massive. For a person of 5'3", 5'4" to use a spear, and just look at the size of the tang on this, how long the shaft would have been. This one would have been so large that anybody trying to use this, it's going to be almost impossible for them to use and wield in combat. They go on, the authors of this article go on to write, quote, "Their unusual size and weight would appear to be an obstacle rather than an aid to anyone carrying them." That would be anyone of a normal size man during that time period. It's just way too big for a spear like that. These things are gigantic. Now remember, these were bronze, yet the Bible records that Goliath was going into his battle against David carrying a bronze javelin, but also it says that he had an iron spearhead. This iron spearhead, according to the Bible, weighed about 600 shekels. How much is that? That's just shy of 3 kilograms, which is about a little over 6.5 pounds. That's pretty big. In any case, the spearheads and the shaft of this thing were so unsuitable for someone trying to fight of that normal size. Yet if somebody is using these the size of Goliath, using the long cubit, this makes perfect sense because it's a supersized weapon for a supersized man, is what we see here. The shaft alone on this would have been, because spears and javelins have to be balanced. In their length, they have to be balanced. So the length on this, judging by the size of this, experts estimate that this would have been a 7-foot long shaft. Look how wide, though, this would have had to been to be put inside a piece of wood. An iron spearhead, though, of this size would be about 12 and a half. The shaft alone would be 12 and a half, maybe even closer to 13 feet in length to be balanced. So we're talking huge, gigantic size weaponry here. So that's what they found at this dig. And that's what was found. Now the Creation Museum in Kentucky was gifted a few years ago with a spear, a reconstructed spear, based on this biblical account of David versus Goliath. Here is a photograph of one of the staff actually holding the spear. Now this has been with a long shaft so it can be balanced. I'll read the caption here. The spear is overall, it's about 12.7 feet long and it weighs 33 pounds. The spearhead is made of iron. The shaft was made of red oak. It's 2 inches in diameter to make the counterweight. So this is a massive spear as you look at the size of this thing. But we mentioned that's not the only weapon that Goliath carried. Goliath also had a sword. Now, because he's so large, Goliath would have had a supersized sword. Everything else is supersized. So, I mean, if he went to McDonald's getting the supersize, would have been perfect for him. Being Goliath is about twice the size of a normal man. The average sword would be larger. It's logical to assume, since he's about 50% taller than a person of that time period, the sword would be about 50% larger also. So the average sword that you find that the Philistines were using during those time periods were around 23, 24 inches. So using my meter stick here, that would be me holding on to the end. So my hand would be at the end. We're talking about a spear only about this kind of length. That's not very long. So just this length right here in front of my body, that would be the size of an average sword that the Philistines would use during that time period. Thus, we can hypothesize that Goliath would have wielded a sword as long as 1.2 meters, slightly longer than this, or roughly 47 inches. Many sword experts today who have studied that time period believe that Goliath's sword would be closer to about just under a meter in length, or about 36 inches. With a handle being about 17 inches for his massive supersized hand that he had, or 7 inches in length, if you will. That's a pretty good size sword. Now, we do know that the Philistines were very fond of one type of sword. They had straight swords, yes, but they were also fond of an Egyptian-styled sword called a khopesh. A khopesh is a sickle-like shape. Here is a picture of one that we have. This is from the Jerusalem Museum. It has a sickle shape to it, and it was used primarily for slicing, but could be used for stabbing also. The little hook that you see at the end here of this blade was used to pull away the sword or weapons from the hand of the opponent. If it was used as a stabbing weapon, they would stab into the person, and then that hook would grab hold of organs and bones as they would thrust it and pull it out. We're talking a lethal weapon. So this is actually a khopesh found in Israel, showing you what this type of a sword that the Philistines seem to like. But Goliath isn't your average Philistine. His sword would have been a little bit bigger. As a matter of fact, I have a sword here that some experts have put together for me to illustrate the size of a sword for a man named Goliath, for the size of this person. This is built on the khopesh style. You can see it has the hook towards the end. Massive handle. My hand is easily dwarfed. There's so much of the handle still sticking out. This thing weighs quite a bit. That is a massive sword, and people who put this together, I can't even hardly hold it out like that. I would not be able to swing this very often in combat because it's just too cotton picking big and heavy. But for a guy the size of Goliath, this would be simple. This would be a very, very handy sword for him to be able to swing around, stab people, pull weapons away. This would have been a great thing to use. So little David, to go up and cut off his head, David would have had to use this as a two-handed sword, no doubt, because he's a boy at the time, and to chop off. The side of this part here of the blade is very sharp. This side is very flat. But it's a very, very effective and killing weapon, this replica here that we have. So Goliath had a massive type of sword that he could use. Now, archaeology has not produced the actual sword of Goliath, nor will it likely happen. Iron and stuff like this, it does break down, and other elements break down as time goes on. But we do know that David killed Goliath and cut off his head. And we do know, too, that David used this sword at times in battle. It's mentioned in the Bible more times in the future. On one occasion, when David is fleeing from King Saul, because Saul's trying to kill him, he grabs Goliath's sword and runs to, of all places, this is when David wasn't thinking too clearly, he runs to the city of Gath for asylum. Now, can you imagine how stupid this is? David is going into the city of Gath, carrying the sword of their champion, Goliath, whom he killed. It wasn't a smart move on David's part, but that's what he did, and that's recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 9 and 10. Well, overall, let's just sum this up. What have we covered about Goliath here? What have we seen? First of all, Goliath, his name has been found in the city of Gath. 2, Goliath is from and lived in the city of Gath. This all fits. Third point, Goliath would have been a giant in comparison to any average height of man during that time period. King Saul was head and shoulders above everybody else, but even he was frightened to go out against this guy. So he is taller, much taller than anybody else would have been. A fourth point, a Philistine coat of mail has been discovered in Israel that suggests that the wearer was abnormally large size. It would have probably fit Goliath or one of his brothers, one of these giants, these Anakim. A fifth point, the spear point that was found there in this dig was too large to be used in any typical battle by anybody. It's just too big. And the shaft would have been too long. Thus, we can conclude that this was held and used in battle by somebody who was much larger than a normal person. Again, this fits the Goliath story as being true. A sixth point, the spearhead shows, as we look at it, and I pointed out, there's marks and details that this was used in battle. So this isn't just some decoration thing. It definitely has marks on it that this had been used in battle. These Anakim people that were living in Gath, most likely this was something like what they would use. And then finally, the seventh point, the description that we get of Goliath and his armor all fits what we find in the times of what the archaeologists have deemed that they used at that time period. It all fits. In short, my friends, the Bible, the story of David and Goliath is true. I do believe it's true. The evidence that we see here does not indicate a fairy tale, a made-up myth. What we're seeing, everything logically fits together. And to talk more about giants, that will be in our upcoming lesson that will follow this. But I do believe, without any shadow of a doubt, not only have we found Goliath's name, we have found evidence of the type of armor. It did exist. And though we haven't found his skeleton, nor will we likely, but the thing is, the evidence that we have seen is remarkable to show that this story is not folklore or myth or a fairy tale. David and Goliath actually did live. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this series as we've gone through it thus far, and I hope you'll join us for the final part where we talk about the giants, the Nephilim, the Anakim, etc., throughout the Bible, and what history and other archaeology has found in different cultures around the world. It's fascinating. Some new studies, in fact, dealing with DNA has just been published on some of this, and it's just remarkable. So I hope you join us again for that. And check out other things on our website. And we'd love to hear from you, so please let us hear from you. Let us email us and talk to us, message us, whatever. We'd love to hear. We love hearing comments and stuff. And also, if God puts it upon your heart to help support our ministry, we surely would love to have you on board. So thank you very much. Until we meet again, take care, and may God bless.
Support the show. Become a donor at evidenceforfaith.org/give.